Valley citizens.
Hello and welcome to Veterans of the Valley. I'm Tom Turbyville. General Ted Hopgood's 31-year career in the Marine Corps was followed by 6 years as Commandant of Cadets at Texas A&M. And over the next two Veterans of the Valley shows, we'll cover as much as we can, but still it can't properly tell the story of where he's been and what he's seen. 3 tours of Vietnam, the first one with 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines Kilo Company on the ground in combat. One of his earliest battles was the most intense. His recollections of his career are vivid, especially his time in the National Military Command Center during the start of Operation Desert Storm. Please welcome General Ted Hopgood to Veterans of the Valley. General Hopgood, it is indeed an honor to have you on Veterans of the Valley. Been wanting to have you on the show for a long, long time. You grew up in North Dakota. Cold up there, I know, but eventually you made your way to Texas A&M. It wasn't your first choice. Your first choice was the Naval Academy, but you're glad you ended up in Aggieland, right?
Delighted. Came to Texas A&M after the people at the Naval Academy said perhaps you need to wait another year because high school was a lot of fun and so forth, but Texas A&M just was a fit, I thought, from the very first day.
Came here in 1961, you graduated in 1965, and then started what would be a 31-year career in the Marines. You were sent to Quantico. You were there for 6 months, and you were one of the ones who was designated for immediate deployment to Vietnam. Sort of talk about Quantico and how that immediate deployment came about.
Well, it's true now, as it was then, that all Marine officers, regardless if their specialty is going to be fighter, pilot, helicopters, or infantry, which I was, go to Quantico for 6 months upon being commissioned. So we're all trained together, we're all imbued with the same thoughts and ideals of the Marine Corps. And in my class, we had double companies. We had 587 lieutenants, and 17 of us were infantry officers that went straight from graduation December of 1965 straight to Vietnam. And I was one of those 17, so I guess you could say I was one of the chosen.
Right, and now 4 of the 17 were infantry officers who went over together, and sadly 2 did not survive, but you and another one did. So talk about that.
I remember that the flight over there was 4 of us infantry officers on the same flight, and 2 of us survived, and the other one that survived is a good friend. He's a retired Major General aviator after one tour on the ground in Vietnam. The other 2 went to different units and sadly were killed in action, but our battalion, the one that my friend and I went to, was 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines, and it was a great battalion. I can say that now. I knew it was good at the time, but after a career in the Marine Corps and ample time to reflect, I know it was a great battalion.
You were still a young man. You were not even a year out of college then, and here you were heading to Vietnam. What do you remember your thoughts then? Were you frightened?
You know, I don't think so. It's 21 years old, on your way to war, and you know, on the way over there you meet people who are coming back, so they of course embellish their stories. But throughout my time in the Marine Corps, whether it was officer or enlisted, I thought that the training and the preparation was first rate. And while I guess everybody encounters situations that are new and unusual, I never felt confused, and perhaps because I never felt confused, maybe that did a little bit to boost my courage up. Certainly there were many scary moments, but I guess we were so busy and trying to do the right thing that perhaps they've faded in the back of my mind.
You were a 2nd Lieutenant, 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines Kilo Company. Talk about that outfit.
Well, Kilo Company was commanded by several very great captains. I will say that without reservation. We had 2, and during the time I was there, we had 2 Marines that were awarded the Medal of Honor. All of my squad leaders in my platoon were at least Silver Star, if not Navy Cross winners. We sought out the enemy. In fact, as I recall, my whole career, I never had to look back to see if I was being followed. My men were always with me, and most times they were out in front of me pushing the attack, if you will. You know, The Marine Corps is wonderfully unique in the fact that it attracts young men and women, but young men who want to attack and fight and be part of something that's bigger than them. You know, we don't recruit in dropouts from monasteries. We go after the kids from the Bronx, if you will, from East LA, from the south side of Chicago, and the rugged kids from the small towns all over America, and they come in the Marine Corps, and the Marine Corps takes what's best with each of these individuals and give them what's best with the Marine Corps, and you turn out a superb Marine and a superb fighter for our country.
You spent 13 months in your first tour from February of '66 to March of '67, 11 months as a platoon commander. I want you to talk about, and you were on the ground that time in ground combat. I want you to talk about J.J. Carroll and tell me about him, and then I want you to fast forward like you did with me the other day and talk about your trip not too many years ago to Notre Dame for a football game and sort of how those two stories mesh.
Well, J.J. Carroll was a Notre Dame athlete. He went to Notre Dame as a diver, ended up playing on the football team, and he was our company commander for a month. He lasted a very arduous, difficult, combat-filled month before he was unfortunately killed in action. And I remember he was just bigger than life, as you would say, and I can recall under the poncho at night a few times with the rain coming down and him drinking coffee and me drinking my always ready hot chocolate at the time, of discussing his time when he played at Notre Dame and my time being in the Corps and being supportive of part of the 12th Man and exchanging stories, and his stories were just spellbinding. In fact, one of his favorites was he was fighting hard to make the traveling squad near the end of must have been the 56 or 57 season, because Notre Dame was going out to LA to play Southern California. And this is the days when it's not, wasn't modern times, if you will, so Hollywood and Los Angeles had this great attraction, and he was just trying like everything he could to make the team. So they had an indoor practice facility, and some names of the first Notre Dame first teamers was Myron Patios and Nick Petrosani and Al Ecue, all Americans, and followed on to play in the NFL. And he remembers going through, and they didn't have their pads on, going through and tackling the quarterback. And the first teamers took out retribution on the next play, and he said he woke up on Saturday morning in the Notre Dame infirmary listening to the game on the radio. So he didn't make the trip, and I guess he came out wiser. But anyway, as you said, to fast forward, when I was working at A&M and the Aggies played in South Bend, and my wife and I, along with a group of maybe 10 or 12 others, traveled with the Aggie band to Notre Dame. And as the Aggie band always does before the game, they run through their routine for that game. And at Notre Dame, as in several places, you can't get on the actual field. So we were inside this building, and I just knew it was the place because there was pictures up on the wall of All-Americans, and you could see some of the literature from practices and football. So I knew that's where the football team was working out. And when we were standing in a position to watch the Aggie band play the music and march like only the Aggie band could do, the goosebumps up and down my spine, knowing that was the place where my former company commander, the Notre Dame football player, had spent some of his times. It was a rare moment in my life, and one I'll always remember.
There was a lot of action, especially in July of 1966. I want you to talk about the operation at Hastings. It turned out to be one of the most intense that you would experience in your three tours.
Well, yes, Operation Hastings was July 1966. It was the first real incursion, if you will, of the Marine Corps, in fact, U.S. forces, into the area just below the demilitarized zone of Vietnam. And after a preparation by B-52s to clear out some landing areas, we went in there straight in on helicopters. And the place where we landed became known as Helicopter Valley because 3 got shot down. And I remember getting off the helicopter and immediately going to ground with my nose was about 6 inches off the ground, and I looked up, and in front of me were body parts from Marines that had unfortunately been cut up running into the helicopter blades because the helicopters had crashed there. And for about 10 days we were really under the gun with attacking North Vietnamese that were extremely aggressive, competent soldiers. And we were operating with only 3 companies, vice our normal 4. And it was 24 hours a day. At night we had flare ships up and gunships firing in support of us. And I remember the close air support which we had of our attack aircraft coming down in the valley between the hills, just almost 15 or 20 feet above the ground. They were so close, dropping napalm to our front. And we put a good hurting on the enemy, and we got out and regrouped and came back for another day.
This wasn't the only, obviously, close call, I guess you would call. As a matter of fact, I came up, the magic of the internet tells me about the battle for Hill 400, and it was a narrative written by a Newsweek reporter that was there for that. Talk a little bit about that. That was a little dicey itself.
Hill 400 was, as I recall, was September to October of 1966, about a month after Operation Hastings.
Right.
And we were moving down a ridge line in constant contact with the North Vietnamese, and our company commander was Captain J.J. Carroll, the Navy Cross winner, and we were in constant combat, as they would say. And I remembered several times of being in the very prone position, trying to get closer as I could into the ground if there was any way possible, and having a Marine or 2 of mine running up the trail, looking down at me and say, "Sir, where are they at?" And my bravest thing was to lift my arm about 4 inches above my face and point that way. And without a question, the Marines would dash forward and go, and that was inspiration for me to get up and start acting like an aggressive Marine, which they were showing the way. So it was a tight situation, and one I recall vividly.
The reporter who I found this, I'm going to let you pronounce his name. It's a French name.
He's Arnaud de Bourchgrave.
And he worked for Newsweek.
Yes, he did.
You can find this on the internet. And he reported pretty much a minute by minute from 0930 to 1612. A couple of his narratives in this. At 10:25, Captain J.J. Carroll of Miami, commander of Kilo Company, sees me without a helmet. This is the reporter writing here. He says he never wears one. He unhooked his own from his belt, threw it to me. I also picked up a flak jacket from a KIA. At 10:43, he writes, first airstrike, 2 Phantoms scream in at treetop level, dropping napalm. Then, on their second pass, 500-pound bombs. Fragments fly over our holes, thudding into trees. 2 men get hit by shrapnel. Not close enough, says Captain Carroll to the FAC, the forward air controller. I feel if it's any closer, we'll all get killed. But Carroll says the ordnance fell 200 meters away, and he wants it to be 100 meters closer. Next strike comes in at 75 meters. This must be what an earthquake feels like. Pretty good description of what you recall?
I remember it well. Yes, I do.
Goes on to say at 11:30, grenade rolls down to where Derek Taylor, the correspondent from Britain's Guardian, is crouching. Taylor, quick as lightning, grabs it, throws it downhill, flips back into his foxhole. It explodes a second later and doesn't so much as scratch him. And it goes on and on just to describe this particular action. But this was your job. This is what you did. You probably didn't have time to be scared. Right?
No, as I said earlier, we were so busy, but I do remember that our unit, our company, in fact, was on the cover of Life magazine at that time. It was also on the cover of Newsweek. And I think that particular reporter was primarily a political reporter that somebody, maybe with a twist of humor, sent forward up to our position, because he got all that he wanted for sure when he was up there.
You talked about a time, this may have been with the Hastings operation, where you said you went 86 straight days sleeping on the ground. That was during the Hastings operation?
You know, when you're over there, you have to do something to put a little humor or try and maybe a little reality into what you're doing. But I remember going 86 days of sleeping on the ground, but perhaps even more important, I remember going 9.5 months without seeing a woman with round eyes while we were deployed into Vietnam on that tour.
General Hopgood has supplied us with some photographs, 3 pictures, and we'd like to go ahead and go to those now. This is from his Vietnam time and, of course, of his youth. And there is a young cadet, right?
That's sophomore year at Texas A&M. all set to charge forward.
So you would have been 20, 19?
I would have been probably 18 or 19 at that time.
18 or 19 years old.
I like the hair, by the way.
I do too. I do too. Squared away cadet right there. Right there. Now we obviously fast forward to Vietnam and talk about this picture. That's you in the background.
That's me in the background trying to oversee what's going on. And in the foreground with the radio up to his ear is Captain J.J. Carroll. And if you look in his left hand, you can see his compass. So he's coordinating either aircraft or fire to our front. And the two Marines left to right with them was Daniel Gertzmacher and Perry Francis. You remember the radio operators, because oftentimes the action gets us so heavy that you're away from the radio, and you'll come back and one of your PFCs or Lance Corporals will be on the radio calling in airstrikes or kind of running things till you get back there. So
now, J.J. Carroll, as I believe you mentioned, about 8 days after this battle for Hill 400, he sadly was killed in action.
Yes, he was.
And the next photograph, I want you to tell us about that.
Well, he was killed in action, and I believe it was late October, early November. And this is on the birthday of the Marine Corps, 10 November 1966 in Vietnam. And there was a position about 5 miles to the south. It was artillery position, and they named it Camp J.J. Carroll in his honor. And this is Marines from Kilo Company, 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines. I'm on the right-hand side of the picture, the one kneeling with my arm on my knee. Mm-hmm. And all those other Marines, each has a story in its own right, and it's wonderful to look at the picture and remember each one for who he was and what he contributed.
Quite a photograph, indeed. This was just your first tour of Vietnam. You came home, Marine Barracks in D.C., and you married Carolyn.
Yes, I did.
In June of 1967, and you all have been married some 41 years now.
Yes, we have.
A military wife, and we could do another 2 shows just about her. I know that we could. In Washington, just under 2 years, did security at Camp David. Talk about that.
That is
duty.
correct. The duty was at that time was the Marine Barracks in Washington. Mm-hmm. One of our additional duties was to provide security for Camp David Presidential Retreat, Thurmont, Maryland, and the routine was to spend 4 weeks down at the barracks and then 2 weeks up on the hill, as we called it. Mm-hmm. And to be up there when the president was in residence. At that time it was LBJ, was an experience. I found it enlightening, but I also found it challenging and fun. One of the things about Camp David is they have an opportunity to shoot all kinds of weapons up there, shotguns, rifles, pistols, etc. So we had plenty of ammunition, courtesy of the Secret Service. So me and my Marines busted lots of caps up there.
I thought it was interesting that you said that at Quantico, at Basic, you were evaluated for all kinds of duty, and one of the things you evidently had graded high on was for this kind of duty because of your experience with the Ross Volunteers at A&M.
Well, the Marine Corps has significant ceremonial responsibilities in the Washington, D.C. area, and when I went through the basic school as a second lieutenant, they wrote down ceremonial proficiency. So when they were looking to make assignments for us lieutenants coming out of Vietnam, somebody noticed that and assigned me back into Washington. And being able to march and handle a sword proved to be advantageous for getting that assignment. And I do reflect that the training received as a Ross volunteer at Texas A&M was instrumental in giving me a head start in that area.
After D.C. Amphibious Warfare School, August of 1969, back to Vietnam for your second tour. It was a little bit different than your first tour. Talk about your second tour, and then that led to your third tour because you never really did come back home between tours.
Well, when I got back to Vietnam in September of '69, the situation had changed in the fact that the unit I took over, the company, Charlie Company, 1st Battalion, 3rd Marines, was almost within a click, 1,000 meters of where I'd left the company 2 years before, and the situation was more dire or more dangerous, I guess you could say, than when we had left. And President Nixon had announced the pullout, and the first unit to be pulled out was one of the 1st Marine units, was the 3rd Marine Division, which I was in. So I was a company commander of Charlie 1-3 for about 4 or 6 weeks, right up on the DMZ again, and the situation was as tough and demanding as you could imagine, plus the monsoon season had arrived, so it was constant bad weather and rain coming down. But when the division went home, I became an aide for the commanding general of the division. He picked the captain, and one of my, in fact, I replaced, I guess I can use the name, he's the current director of the FBI, First Lieutenant Mueller, who's now the director of the FBI, had been the general's aide, but he wanted a captain to ease the transition, if you will, from the 3rd Division going back to Okinawa. So we transitioned out of Vietnam back to Okinawa and got back there, as I recall, in November of '69, and I was on Okinawa with the 3rd Division and General Jones until April, when I extended my tour overseas by 2 months so I'd be sure to get back to Vietnam for the action. Of course, there was not joy on the home front when I told Carolyn I was going back for 2 months, but I did go back to Vietnam and served as a company commander of Echo Company, 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines, and this was in the Da Nang area, somewhat of a static position, but certainly full of challenges, as every company command position would be in a combat zone.
Right. The second tour, the first time you're over there, is an aide to General W.K. Jones. Is
Yes.
that right? For 6 weeks.
Right.
And as an aide, there's a lot of flying involved. And you talked about the marginal weather,
Right.
and that.
Well, the aid time
Scary.
was let me correct you, it was about 6 months, about
6
a
months.
month and a half in Vietnam, and then 3.5 or so back in Okinawa. But
Right.
the weather in Vietnam, for anybody that's been in that part of the country, is it can get very bad real in a hurry, because not only does it rain, but the ceiling, the cloud level comes way down. And my wife would tell me that she was so glad when I became an aide, because she knew that I was really out of the line of fire. And then when I got home, I reported some of the very dicey, if you will, helicopter flights of, I remember flying down the coast about 70 miles going south down to Da Nang, where the weather was so bad that we just hovered along the beach all the way down, and one of the passengers on our little Huey helicopter was a Navy chaplain who had his rosary beads out the whole way. So, yeah, there was some interesting moments.
Yeah, when the chaplain gets the beads out.
Yeah.
You know, you had the rifle company around Da Nang, and this was your 3rd tour. Talk just a little bit more about that, because I know that you told me that it was a tough tour because of the morale, and keeping the morale up with the people, because of the unseen enemy, you said.
Well, what it was is the United States had given every indication that we were coming out of Vietnam, and the units knew, the troops certainly knew that their time in country, in danger, was coming to an end. And I guess you could say maybe the enemy was emboldened by the fact, because they knew what was happening too. And the Marines, and I guess any troops, don't do well when you have to sit in a static position. You prefer to be on the attack, moving, so that you have the initiative, so to speak. And once we surrendered the offensive initiative, if you will, it became unpleasant, and I think everybody from the top on down was ready to get out of Vietnam. And let's say that we answered our nation's call, but it's time to go somewhere else.
This was a time, 1968, 1969, that back home there was a lot of unrest. It was obviously not a popular war politically. How did that resonate in Vietnam, not only to the people that you were with, but to you personally?
Well, to me personally, best I can recall, I felt I was so busy and had such a responsibility for the welfare of my subordinates that I just couldn't put it in to really get to the forefront of my mind. And I think the troops were so focused on their mission of what they were supposed to be doing that directly it didn't have that big a impact, but indirectly you never know. It might be somewhere in the back of your mind, but it's just something you can't afford to think too much about.
But I mean, it's not like today where CNN is always there, but you still knew, you had word, you knew what was going on back home.
Yes, well, we had access. We had every day you get the Stars and Stripes newspaper, and I think that everybody was interested in what was going back home, because that's where everybody wanted to get back to. So the fact that there was unrest at home was everybody knew that, and it didn't help the situation at all. But I'm proud to say, remained focused on what we were supposed to be doing.
When you came back home, were you certain that you were going to stay in the Marines and extend your career, or were there thoughts of getting out and being a civilian?
No, I had made up my mind. I don't know if it was at Texas A&M or when I got commissioned. I just knew that the Marine Corps was going to be my life, was going to be my career. I thoroughly enjoyed the bosses that I had in the Marine Corps, the leaders. The troops were just absolutely outstanding, and the lifestyle and the camaraderie was something that was just wonderful to be part of, and I felt really honored to be part of it all and to have a career in the Marine Corps. And I felt that I had a certain degree of a competence, and I had the confidence, if you will, to pursue a career in it.
Well, 25 more years you will serve, and we're going to talk about that next week.
Okay, great, Tom. Thank you.
General Ted Hopgood spent another 25 years on active duty after he left Vietnam the last time, a quarter century that took him all over the country and the world. And that was all before he came back to his alma mater in 1996. Next week, we will hear more of the career of General Ted Hopgood. I'm Tom Turbeville. We'll see you next week on Veterans of the Valley.